Thank you, Eric. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great joy to be here this morning. I am pretty new to the job. As Eric mentioned, I just started 2.5 weeks ago in my position in New York. But I am not new to finance, having worked for decades on getting money to where the needs are. And I think that's what we should be talking about. And I will be a little provocative this morning that in all that we do, sometimes the message is lost in translation. The global GDP, as we know, is about 30% in the public sector and 70% in the private sector. And we have excessively focused ourselves on talking about public finance driving climate impact. 30% is important, useful, but certainly is not going to make the difference that we all like to see. I was just seeing a graphic yesterday, somebody tweeted it out, that if we started in 2003, the transition to a low carbon economy, we would need to drop by 3% every year to get to parity, carbon neutral by 2100. In 10 years, or now 15 years, so in 15 years, if we start today, we haven't actually in the way we should have, we would need to drop at 10% in terms of carbon intensity. If we start 10 years later, we need to drop by 30%, which is almost impossible to achieve. So that's why time is of the essence. That's why the IPCC special report that tells us that we only have 10 years to turn around. Otherwise, there will not be much turning around left for us to achieve. I think that's what is crucial for us to understand, for all the very important people in this room. And one thing that I want to really point out that I don't see that much happening with the finance sector professionals that I have had the privilege of working with. There is some understanding, but not at the level that we should be really working at, and that is about risk. All of us in this room understand that risk management is at the core of everything we do, whether it is pension funds, insurance funds, sustainable finance, innovative finance, blended finance, or the normal plain Jane finance that we all do by the trillions every year. It's risk. That's what decides whether the coupon rate is 1% or 15%, because we try to manage risks. And what beats me is that we don't see the climate risk for what it is. And this is going to wipe out all long-term investments. We are already seeing that in many industries, and we will see that more and more. There's an excessive focus on a few particular industries, on job creation. Just to give you a small number, if you take up the steel industry and all the ancillaries, if you take up the automotive sector and all ancillaries, and you take up the IT services, which everybody talks about, altogether, there are about 30 million jobs worldwide. Agriculture, on the other hand, has 1 billion jobs worldwide. We never talk about it. And that's what is going to drive climate impact worldwide. How do we find the resolve and the resources to drive into sustainable agriculture, conservation of forestry resources worldwide? Because that's what will make a difference in the next 10 years. Without that, we are lost. So we can meet year over year, congratulate each other on the incremental impact or the improvements we are making, but that's not going to cut it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to be that blunt, but that's reality. And the sooner we get to terms with reality, the better it is for all of us, but more importantly, the people and the planet. Last but not the least, I'm delighted, and I want to thank Eric Usher, the head of our finance initiative, for leading the conversation on environmental finance within the House, within your environment, but more importantly outside, and also our hosts and sponsors for bringing all of us together to to this very, very important conversation. This is not just a conversation about finance. This is a conversation about the future of our planet as we know it. So let's focus on that, and over the next 2 days, spend as much time as we can on looking at solutions, looking at possibilities. And in that, I want to share, as the last comment, on blended finance and innovative finance. We started something in Indonesia called the Tropical Landscapes Finance Facility with BNP Paribas. We've catalyzed a project of $350 million, and it gives me great pleasure to mention that here in Paris, because BNP Paribas is a French bank and one of the largest banks in the world. And mind you, it's about risk. We managed to build a partnership together that was able to contain and manage the risks in a way that we spent about $500,000 in setting up that facility, which is not a lot of money by any of your standards. And we've already generated a project of $350 million that brings back to life 88,000 hectares of degraded land, which is, by the way, bigger than in size of Singapore. And then we are working on, in India, as we set up something called the Sustainable India Finance Facility, where we have generated, again with much less investment than $500,000, we have generated a project of $2.3 billion. And that actually brings back to life 6 million farmers who are doing zero chemical farming in 8 million hectares of cropland that will provide naturally sourced and naturally farmed produces to 55 million people. That's the kind of impact we need to look at. That's the kind of projects and ideas we need to find the resolve to invest in, because that's what is going to change the paradigm in a way that we can all be proud of in 10 years' time. Thank you so much. Thank you.